Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our vision is for every child on the planet to have access to a church. We help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. I'm so glad you joined us on this episode of the Church Planting Podcast. We're here right after Christmas. I have a special guest, Dave Jane. Dave Jane is an incredible church planter. His church just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And Dave and I are going to dialogue together about kind of the aftermath of Christmas, what it's like to deal with the letdown from adrenaline. How do you keep your staff healthy? How do you keep your family healthy through all things Christmas as a church leader? Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone, and welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm absolutely welcome, my friend, Dave Jane. So good to have you with us, Dave.
It's good to be here.
Yeah.
And a Merry Christmas to you too.
We have a lot of experience together. I mean, just a year ago, you and I were up at base camp at Mount Everest having a great time together.
I know. It's crazy.
And so we're church planting companions, we're good friends, and we're climbing companions as well.
That's
Dave,
yeah.
you guys just celebrated your 10-year anniversary. You're no longer a church plant. You're 10 years in now.
I know. It is so bizarre because I feel like we're a church plant because it feels like just yesterday that we planted. But man, 10 years went by real quick. And we see that, there are clear signs that we are more established as a church than a church plant. So it's just exciting times.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, we're going to talk on this episode just about kind of the aftermath of Christmas. I mean, just kind of sometimes the worn out feelings, the celebratory feelings, the challenges with families, the joys with families. What's something you do to try to stay healthy coming through the holiday season?
Sure. So I would say, for us personally, as a family, especially since we planted Connect, I'd been on staff at churches before, but I'd never been the lead pastor of a church. So we realized that, Christmas Eve, the Christmas season has high demands on us. And I didn't want our family to suffer as a result. So we just had to kind of adjust some of our traditions, So Christmas Eve, we always have services. Our church, we've kind of lent towards the evening candlelight service. And so we do some stuff during the day and we hang out with fun, but we kind of know that about 3:00, that's going to shift. We're going to, and the kids come and they've been a part of that and they're excited. They help give out candles as people arrive. And depending on what times our services are, we're normally there till early evening, 7-8 o'clock, and then we come back. And incidentally, I've got a young staff. There's 7 of us on staff, and out of the 7, 4 have young families. So we just talked about this recently in a staff meeting. I said, it's great and you get to serve God in this way and then you get to be on staff as a church, but sometimes it comes at a cost, and Christmas is one of those costs. So we had just a conversation around the table. What are some traditions that you're going to change now that you're on staff and your kids? And actually, one really cool thing, we have 3 Christmas Eve services this year. And the staff decided, just independently of me, that they were going to bring all their kids to the 3rd service. So all the staff kids would be in that last service together. So what I'm going to do, Greg, is prior to the service, I bought some little gifts for the kids on the team. And we're going to pull them all into the auditorium, and we're just going to go, hey, you guys, we just think you're fantastic. We know your mums and dads do a lot here, but we love you guys. And Merry Christmas. I hope you have a great time. Here's some gifts from us to you. So we're hoping that through the busyness of Christmas, the staff and their families in particular will come out still feeling very loved and appreciated.
Okay, so first of all, there were 2 things in there, Dave, that I picked up that I think are great tips for all of our church leaders, church planters that are tuning in with us. One, you actually sat down and had a conversation with your staff about this, which an open dialogue about, hey, this could be tough. There are challenges that are presented. What are some creative ways that we can make this great? Which I think is just a brilliant idea, is just to, get the elephant out on the table and talk through this. And secondly, I love that you as a church and you personally said, hey, we're going to be a blessing to your families and to your children. buying
Hmm.
gifts, that's a really creative
Yeah.
idea. And the kids look forward to that. I remember, we were back in my River Tree days, there was a point where one year we had 12 Christmas Eve services and they started 4 days, before Christmas. And so
Yeah.
we were tied up every night, going into that. But I love your idea, man. The other third thing that you pointed out there was your kids were involved with you, which I think
Yeah.
that's just a brilliant idea as well. We always had, we brought, Christmas Eve service always, ended with singing of Silent Night, same thing, candlelight.
Yeah.
My wife,
Yeah.
is our worship leader, so she was on the platform with me, but I'd bring my two kids up and they'd hold
Yeah.
candles on the platform and sing with us
Yeah.
as well. And I
Yeah.
think involving them as much as possible is the right thing to do as well. Dave, what are some things that that you do for like after Christmas? Is there a way that you let your staff recharge, or I mean, do
Hmm.
you shut down the following weekend? What do you kind of do there to kind of bless your team?
Yeah. So one of the cool things just early on, our management team, some call them elders, they made the decision very early on in the church journey that they were going to put money in the budget for Christmas bonuses. And they just went out last week to our staff, and all of them, I feel guilty taking the thanks from them because really it's kind of out of my hands. This was decided by, but having said that, I do challenge our management team never to give that up because it does mean a lot to our
Yep.
staff. So just around Christmas time, the money's tight, and just having that little extra bonus, building that into the budget just means such a lot to them. And then, yeah, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe, we took the Sunday off between Christmas and New Year. It was something to do with the calendar that year. I think New Year fell on New Year's Day or something. We decided, hey, people aren't going to come to church on the morning of New Year's Day. So, but it was so well appreciated from the volunteers, the staff. We do that every year now. We take that year off, and I know that could be a challenge for some churches, even financially, but I feel like in this day and age with online giving, it doesn't even really hurt us financially. But even if we did take a dip, I still think the benefits outweigh the cons there. The pros outweigh the cons because it just gives our staff that whole week after Christmas where they're not thinking about the next Sunday service over Christmas dinner. Do you know what I mean? They've got a nice long break. We normally come back into the office 2 or 3 days before that first Sunday in the new year. But it's a good 7, 8, 9 day break. And I'll be honest, Greg, I'm saying we do this for my staff. I love it. For me, it just gives me,
Yeah.
I have to work hard at being prepared ahead of time so I can truly switch off during that time. But, and what we were seeing as well, and I know other churches do this and they probably do it for the same reason. We were seeing our attendance was a lot lower on that Sunday between Christmas and New Year, right following Christmas. But what we realized was to have a service, we still needed the same number of people on the worship team, the same number of people to make coffee, So your attendance may be half, but you still need 100% of your volunteers. So it's just becoming a challenge. So we just said, you know what, let's take that Sunday off, and it's a good reset. And then that first Sunday in the new year, our numbers are up because everyone, having not been there for a couple of weeks, they all come, and it's just a great start to the new year.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if it's as much of a theological discussion these days, and maybe in your church tradition you can't do that. But for us again back at River Tree, we got to the point where the week after the Christmas Eve services, we shut down everything but our finance office, which
Hmm.
because of end of year gifts coming in and so forth.
Sure.
If someone needed shepherding or pastoral care, we had that certainly available. But we didn't
Yeah.
do those
Yeah.
during the next weekend gatherings at all. And there were a few reasons for that. One is because you had just done, we had just done 3 weeks of gatherings in one
Yeah.
weekend, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now we were just all worn out. But the
Hmm.
other thing is, let's set staff aside, Dave. Our volunteers need a break, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
they just
Absolutely.
served extra gathering services
Yeah.
at Christmas
Yeah.
Eve. And
Yeah.
for them to go, oh my goodness, I don't have to be back in children's ministry as much as they love children's ministry. I don't have to be
Sure.
back there this next weekend. for our volunteers, it was like a bonus as well,
Yeah.
to get that extra week off. Now, I
Mhm.
love the idea of the pay bonuses, if you will.
The Christmas
And
bonus.
so
Yeah.
you're saying your elders actually implemented that. They
Yes.
just came to you and said, "Hey, this is something we want to put in place."
Yeah, yeah, it was amazing actually because I mean, we've been doing it for years now, so I don't remember the exact conversation, but I don't remember me going to them saying, "Hey, I think we should do this." So I don't know if some of them at the time worked for companies where this was a practice, and they thought, "Hey, we should do this for the staff." So, and to be honest with you, if you put it in the budget, if you plan for it, then it's an easy decision to make. But for the staff, when December rolls around, we have a big Christmas party. It's interesting. Just a little side note. I had lunch with a friend of mine recently, and he's the pastor of a church. And he was saying, he's a new pastor. And when he came on staff, he found out that every Christmas, the church would send the staff out for this real nice dinner in a fancy restaurant. And he
Yeah.
said, so I put a stop to that. He said, now they come to my house and we do a potluck. And the irony was, the fancy restaurant he mentioned was the one that we were going to with our staff the following Friday night. And at the time, I thought to myself, man, I understand what you're saying here from a financial point of view. But again, the staff gives so much all year round, and especially at Christmas. I've been on staff at churches where I've experienced burnout, where I've seen people I've worked with frustrated at the church. And the reality is, one way to solve that is to give them less challenges, but the church doesn't allow that, especially at Christmas time when you've got lots of new people coming. So I think the expectation is, no, it's going to be challenging, but we're going to try and make some rewards there. So a Christmas bonus. So we did. We took them out for a lovely steak dinner. I stood up at the end and said, listen, I really appreciate every one of you. You give so much. And a couple of our staff, Greg, honestly, they're young families. The restaurant we went to, they don't get to go there on their date nights. Olive Garden's their date night. So us going out for this steak dinner, it really meant a lot to them. But to me, maybe the $100 that their meal cost, it was a good investment because of how much they give, especially at Christmas time. So
Okay, so that's
I'm
an
just,
interesting. That's a great way to look at it, Dave. Yeah, rather than looking at the expense, we look at it as an investment in our staff and in their
yes,
families.
yeah, yeah,
That's just so important because we can pinch pennies and cut expenses to the point where we're actually damaging our staff
yeah.
more than we realize. Okay, I want to get to some nuts and bolts on this issue, just
Okay.
because I'm sure there are some leaders out there going, okay, I really like that concept. So how do you decide the bonuses? Are you doing a percentage of a person's staff? Does everybody of salary, does everybody get the same amount? And you don't need to say the amounts. Just give us some kind
Sure.
of idea of how to make those decisions.
Yeah. So, interesting enough, myself and the board, we sit down each year and go over the budget together. So I do get to have a little say in that. Um, we have one part-time staff member and the rest are full-time. But honestly, Greg, we have a custodian and his wife who do work, and we even cut them a check. It's
Absolutely.
sliding scale. But even then, we are so appreciative for what they do, and so it may start, at the low end of couple $100, but for some of the full-time longest serving people on the team, it could be $1,000. So,
Yeah.
and it's kind of based on length of time you've been on staff, whether you're full-time, part-time. But we've never done like a fraction of the salary or anything like that, but we've kind of looked at it. And I
Okay.
think anywhere between $500 and $1,000 at Christmas time for an individual, that's a big part of their Christmas budget. I mean, we're not going to cover every expense, but for those, especially young families with kids, that's like, wow, we can afford
No.
um, to do this at Christmas because some of the things we want
Well,
to get the kids for
or if they're
Christmas.
traveling after Christmas, right? And they've
Yeah.
got to have some
Yes.
travel money, some gas money, or making some
Yeah.
flights to see their
Yeah.
families.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing we have to think through. That we have we always had to think through. It wasn't if you're staff at a church and you have family. I mean, your family's in England, but even if your
Yeah.
family's out of state, right?
Yeah.
You can't leave until those Christmas services
Right.
are over.
Yeah.
And so now you're traveling at one of the most challenging times of the year, one of the most expensive
Hmm.
times of the year.
Expensive times.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
so to be able to bless them is, a really nice bonus. Dave, let me shift
Yeah.
gears here just a little
Sure.
bit now because on the flip side of the aftermath of Christmas, I learned this quite a few years ago. So one of the things I learned, so you and I did the 18-day trek to Everest Base Camp,
Yeah.
and it was brutal. And one of the things I learned about climbing mountains and trekking through the mountains is that when I come down off the mountain, so think about this metaphor. When
Hmm.
we come down off the mountain, what's happened is the adrenaline rush of the climb has been going on for us, for you and I at that point for 18 days. I mean, it's intense.
Yeah.
It's grinding every day, but it's exhilarating as well. And so we
Hmm.
come down off the
Hmm.
mountain, and what I learned physiologically, and this was, to get to pay some money to a therapist to teach me this, was that physiologically now my adrenaline levels will absolutely crash for
Yeah.
several days. And that's
Yeah.
that's not that's not something bad about me or you or any leader. That is purely physiological. And so
Hmm.
our adrenaline levels crash. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it's very similar to the Christmas season. I mean, we're going
Hmm.
into, probably some of our biggest attendance gatherings of the year.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
gearing
Yeah.
up for it in advance.
Yeah.
We're doing multiple gatherings or even a single gathering. It is a rush and a half. And then all
Hmm.
of a sudden, we're at home the next day. We have a great, hopefully a good morning, with our family and so forth.
Yeah.
And then we're going to someone else's home and someone else's home. But then the
Hmm.
next day, and
Yeah.
the adrenaline is starting to just pour out of us. Um,
Uh-huh.
do
Uh-huh.
you, do you ever, do you ever experience that?
Yeah, I do. And it hits me in two ways. So the first way is and you and I talked about this on the trek. I remember that. I'm extroverted by nature. Like on a Sunday, I'm in the lobby, before and after service, I'm talking to people. But I've recognized this unique part of my personality that I love being around people. I get charged and energized from being around people. But there comes a point where it's too much, and then I just need to withdraw. And I need just
Yeah.
to be alone. And I just don't want to be. And what I found, particularly around Christmas time, is the extroverted energy is even higher. So the introverted alone time on Christmas Day becomes even higher as well. And it's detrimental to my family. What should be the most fun morning of the year as we gather around the Christmas tree? I'm sat over in the chair. I just don't want to engage, So I've had to recognize that and work against that a little bit, and maybe Christmas afternoon when the kids have opened their gifts and they're off playing with them, we've had a big lunch, then I'll go and take a 2 or 3 hour nap in the afternoon and just but I have to work a little bit harder and not letting my family get the worst of me because Connect Church got the best of me the day before.
Yeah. So, Dave, one of my practices, I just had in the Thanksgiving season, just this past Thanksgiving season, I had
Yeah.
3 weeks of intensely being on the road. I mean, I was gone from home
Mm,
for 3 weeks. I had an executive
yeah.
team meeting, then I had a board meeting back to back. I had actually a really fun Thanksgiving week, but my whole family was in town and it was go, 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 go the whole
Hmm.
time. And then I had another gathering for another 5 days intensely. And I came home after those 3 weeks. And on about day 2 at home, I actually said to Julie, my wife, whom you know, I
Mm,
said, honey, I said, I'm struggling with depression. And she said,
mhm.
well, it was really good for me to be honest about that, first of all, which
Yeah.
I'd encourage all of our leaders when you're feeling those things.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we were dialoguing about it. And what we believe is it was just seriously the adrenaline kind of seeping
Yeah.
out of my body.
Yeah.
And I needed, 2 or 3 days to just go, it's okay. And I remember one
Yeah.
night I slept for 10 hours. I just
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
an extra long sleep. And so
Yeah.
I would encourage all of you who are listening, if that's you, man, I know you can't do it, on Christmas Day, obviously, but maybe Christmas night or the next night,
Mhm.
you really
Mhm.
do try to get in bed, at nine
Yeah.
o'clock and sleep till 9 the
Yeah.
next morning.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
sometimes one of the most spiritual things you can do is sleep.
Yeah.
and get that, so how do you recharge in that time, Dave?
So, I mean, definitely a little bit of sleep. I do enjoy that week between Christmas and New Year. It's kind of more of a downtime. But actually, Greg, what I do as well is, this has changed through stages of life. Our kids are a bit older now; they're college age, and my daughter's a sophomore in high school. But we'll try and plan some things during that week because I know that if I don't plan anything during that week, it just becomes,
Yes.
you know, so maybe I'll
Yes.
plan a day and say, no, this day we are going to do nothing. It's absolutely fine to just veg, watch a movie,
It's a
sleep
pajama
in,
day.
It is exactly. And that's going to be on the agenda. But this day we're going to plan to drive up to Wisconsin Dells and go skiing. We'll do a little bit of
Yeah.
skiing at the little hill up in Wisconsin and we'll put that on the agenda. We'll plan that because what I'm realizing is if I don't plan that, that rest is good, but then it becomes bad because you just become lethargic and lazy all week long. So,
Yeah. Hey, that
and my
that's
family
really
suffer as
good.
a result.
And so it's even, Dave, the thing that I found too is in those times, is to make sure I'm getting outside, like skiing,
Hmm.
getting some fresh
Yeah.
air.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I live in Cleveland, Ohio, right? So it's typically freezing up here between
Yeah.
Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
But we always say there, and we talked about this on the track. There's no bad weather. There's only bad clothes. And
I
so,
like it. Yeah.
if you get the right clothes, you can go for a walk with your kids or with your wife
Yeah.
or just by yourself and get out in that
Yeah.
fresh air. Exercise becomes a really important part. And I'm not saying you have to
Yeah.
exercise the 2 or 3 days after the big letdown, but get back in that habit as quickly as
Yes.
you can to
Yeah.
release some of those endorphins because that's a lot of
Mhm.
this is physiological. A lot of people,
Yeah.
think that it's spiritual attack and so forth. And I think sometimes it is, but most often I think it's
Sure.
just physiological response to a big event.
Yeah.
So, Dave, the other part, the dark side of this is when we have that adrenaline letdown and we've been around crowds and they've been going, oh, Dave, you're the best. And you've just made this Christmas Eve wonderful, which you have. God's worked through you and your team. And that's happened. There's this temptation. We are more susceptible to temptation after these big events than probably
Hmm.
any other time in
Hmm.
our life. And
Yeah.
that's why that recovery period is so important, as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So any ways anything you do to specifically guard yourself against maybe some of those dark times?
Sure. So, I mean, every pastor listening to this podcast will relate to this, but the one good thing about all the accolades that you receive on a Christmas Eve service, all the, nice messages, maybe a card from someone in the congregation, you open, it's got a gift card, you kind of come home
Yeah.
feeling on top of the world. And then the next day your wife reminds you, no, you're peeling the potatoes, you're cooking the turkey, we
Yes.
don't see the guy they all see. I see the guy who needs to take the garbage out because
Yep.
we need to make more room for the mess here. So that's good. It's healthy to be back at home where people remind you, reality, because otherwise that's dangerous. I think you come off Christmas thinking I'm the king of the world, and it's, I don't think that's a healthy place to be in.
No.
So, being reminded of the reality of who we are. And then again, I think just what I said before, Greg, because what we've done is because we've given our staff that week, that following Sunday, there's no service. So really that's a week to 10 days of nothing. But we're coming off the back of 10, 20 days of going hard, like really busy work, constant. We have a kids carol service. We have a big Christmas market we do as an outreach event. It's not just Christmas Eve. There's multiple things through the Christmas season
Yeah,
we do.
that's correct. Right.
It's through outreach. Yeah. So I'm learning I've got to have some kind of agenda, even if the agenda is, hey, today we're going to sleep in and do nothing, but tomorrow we're going to do that, because if I don't have a plan for that downtime, that's when it becomes dangerous for me, whether it's physiologically, temptation, whatever it might be, because it's almost like you've got too much time on your hands and, no plans, which in and of itself isn't ideal. But when you're coming up such a busy time, it's like driving at 100 miles an hour down the freeway and then suddenly you turn off and you go down. So you might only be doing 30 or 40, but it feels like you're going nowhere because you were just going so fast.
Dave, the other thing at a real practical level that I tried to implement, and this was hard for me, just to be real authentic with all of our listeners, is it was really easy for me, when everybody said, "Oh, great job preaching," da 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 da, and then it's the next day, and in our home, my mom, my wife, they're making this Christmas brunch or dinner and so
Mhm.
forth, and it would be really easy for me to lay on the couch and let people serve me. And
Yeah.
not that I didn't enjoy that. And I'm not saying I
Uh,
shouldn't do that. Like my mom, she knew, and that was one of her goals, was just to take care of her
sure.
son, right? Um, but at the same time, I realized, hey, one of the things I can do here to kind of combat this fatigue and combat this attitude, that I deserve this, is to get up and serve. And so to be the one that cleans the table after dinner, to be the one that picks
Yeah.
up all the wrapping paper and puts it in the trash
Yes.
bags, and
Yeah.
like you said, takes out the
Yeah.
garbage.
Exactly.
And reminds me that part of leadership is that we get the great privilege of speaking to hundreds and even to thousands of people on Christmas Eve.
Hmm.
But the most important part of my leadership is the way I accept the example as a servant leader for my family and those I love the day after the big platform,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 Hey, and I'll say something else, Greg, and maybe there's a few people listening to the podcast who will relate to this. So 10 years now as the lead pastor of Connect. I'd been on staff at churches before then, but never been the lead pastor. So it took me 3 or 4 years to learn this as a church planter. But now that I've learned it, it's revolutionized my life. So my nature, unfortunately, is I kind of, I respond, I react, so the first 4 or 5 years at Connect, we would do a series, and then week 4 or 5 of a 6-week series, I start to think, well, what series should we do next? And I was sort of planning, I was building the plane in the air because there was so much going on, so. And then about 4 or 5 years in, a good friend of mine who's a pastor here in town challenged me on that. And he and we meet every November, and we sit down together, we block off a day or two, and we both plan out our series for the following year. And he's in a very different type of church than me. So his series always look a lot different than me. But we bounce ideas off each other. I'll say, hey, I've got this series I'm thinking about on Moses. He goes, oh, you should do this, and we come out of that. It's a lot of work, but I get so much more accomplished working with him. But I come out of that with a framework for the following year of my entire sermon series. So I know what the topics will be. And I've even got a little bit of an idea of what each week will be. So that's another thing, Greg, that's really helped me. Now I go into Christmas not thinking on Christmas Day, man, what am I going to preach on next? Which I'm embarrassed to admit was the case.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. I don't want to spend Christmas thinking about my next sermon series or my next sermon. I want to go into it so prepared that I can switch off. And other than maybe a pastoral care situation, I really can shut the laptop and enjoy my family time over Christmas.
Dave, this has just been a wealth of good ideas from you. I am so appreciative. Thanks for being on the Church Planting Podcast. Everyone, go rest, be refreshed, and have a blessed holiday.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.